Hello, my friends. Welcome back. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I never thought a simple visit to a neighbor's house could turn into a nightmare. But that's exactly what happened last summer. It all began when I agreed to house sit for my friend Jenna while she took a trip out of state. Her house was in a small town called Pine Hollow, nestled on the outskirts of a dense forest. It looked harmless enough, a modest two-story house with a white picket fence and a quiet street, but there was something about it that set my nerves on edge the moment I arrived. The first night was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I unpacked a few things, made dinner, and settled into the couch with a book. Pine Hollow was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural if you're used to the city. As I read, I could hear the wind rustling through the trees, and faintly, I thought I heard someone walking outside. I checked the door, but the porch light revealed only the empty yard. I shook it off. Probably just a neighbor. The next morning, I met the man who lived next door. He introduced himself as Mr. Caldwell, a tall, thin man in his 60s. His hair was gray and neatly combed, his clothes pressed, and his smile polite but stiff. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, extending a hand. I shook it cautiously, feeling an odd chill. "You'll find it quiet here. Most people keep to themselves." "Thanks," I said. "I like quiet." He nodded, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a hesitation I couldn't place. "Just be careful at night. Sometimes the woods get restless." I laughed nervously, assuming he meant wildlife. "Restless woods? Sounds like a story." He didn't smile. "Not a story." The first few days were uneventful. I went about my work, took walks around the neighborhood, and tried to ignore the creeping unease I felt whenever I looked toward the edge of the forest. But by the third night, things started to change. I woke around midnight to the sound of tapping at the window. At first, I thought it was a branch brushing against the glass, but the tapping was deliberate, almost rhythmic. I froze. The sound stopped as suddenly as it started. Heart pounding, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I went back to sleep, though uneasily. The next morning, I found scratches on the outside of the window frame, deep and jagged, as if someone, or something, had tried to claw its way inside. My stomach twisted. I considered calling Jenna, but I didn't want to worry her. I also debated calling the police, but worried they would dismiss it as a prank or some minor incident. That afternoon, I went outside to investigate the perimeter of the house. The yard was clear, but the forest edge seemed different, darker, thicker than I remembered. A faint path led into the trees, and I noticed symbols carved into the bark of several trees. Crude, jagged markings that repeated in patterns I didn't recognize. I bent closer to inspect them, and an icy chill ran down my spine. Something about those symbols felt alive, pulsating with a strange energy. I decided to leave it alone, though curiosity gnawed at me. That night, the scratching returned, louder, accompanied by soft whispers I could barely make out. I strained to listen, but the words were incomprehensible, carried on the wind with a deliberate rhythm. It seemed to move closer, circling the house. My heart raced, and I felt the oppressive weight of unseen eyes. The following day, I went to Mr. Caldwell's house to ask about the markings. He seemed reluctant to speak at first, but eventually he leaned in, lowering his voice. "Those carvings, they're warnings, not for humans. They guided." "Guide? What?" I asked, feeling my stomach twist. He shook his head. "You shouldn't be here alone. Whatever lives in those woods, it notices, it watches. And if it knows you're curious..." His voice trailed off. That night, sleep became impossible. I lay awake, listening to the house creak and groan, hearing the whispers that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Shadows moved in ways that didn't make sense, stretching and contorting in the corners of my vision. The air grew heavier with each passing hour, as though I were breathing through water. By the fifth night, I could no longer ignore it. I had to see what was happening at the forest edge. I grabbed a flashlight and crept out the back door, trying to remain quiet. The path that led into the trees was narrow, lined with the same carved symbols I had seen earlier. My flashlight illuminated shapes in the darkness, but I couldn't make out what they were. My breath came in short, sharp bursts as I pressed forward. Then I saw it. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, moved between the trees. It didn't walk. It glided, unnaturally silent, its limbs bending at angles that defied anatomy. Its face was featureless, smooth, and dark, yet I felt its gaze pierce me. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and the figure stopped. For a moment it seemed to regard me, patient and intelligent. Then it vanished into the forest, leaving only the whispering in its wake. I ran back to the house and locked every door. My hands shook uncontrollably. Mr. Caldwell's warning echoed in my mind. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave. The next morning, I tried to drive out of Pine Hollow, but the road seemed wrong. Turns that should have led to the highway twisted back toward the woods, as if the town itself were bending around me. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, moving with me, keeping pace without making a sound. My chest tightened, panic setting in. I finally reached the main road, exhausted and trembling. For a moment I felt relief, but it didn't last. That night, back in my city apartment, I began hearing the whispers again, soft, insistent, echoing through the walls. Shadows flickered in corners where no light fell. I realized with a sickening certainty that it had followed me. Days turned into weeks, and the presence grew more insistent. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. Shadows stretched across the walls in ways that made no sense. Whispers carried my name, repeating it over and over. I began to lose sleep entirely, haunted by the feeling of being watched. I tried to research Pine Hollow, the woods and the houses along the edge of town. There were stories, vague, half-forgotten, dismissed as urban legends, but nothing concrete. Families that had lived along the forest disappeared without explanation, and the townsfolk seemed to pretend these events never happened. But I know they did. I saw it with my own eyes. I write this as a warning. If you ever find yourself in a quiet town with woods at the edges and your neighbors seem too watchful, heed the signs. Avoid abandoned properties and never follow strange paths into the forest. Don't investigate symbols or carvings that feel alive, because once it notices you, there is no escape. It is patient, intelligent, and relentless. I live with it now, always on the edge of my vision, whispering from the corners of my apartment. I cannot turn away. I cannot ignore it. And I fear one day it will come for me completely. I hope that warning reaches someone before it's too late. And I hope you believe me when I say, never, ever let your curiosity take you too close. Because if you do, it will follow. And once it follows, you are never truly safe again. Most people remember Christmas Eve for the warm parts, the lights, the family dinners, the gifts waiting under the tree. But I only remember one Christmas Eve in particular, the one that changed everything for me. The one that made me unplug my TV every December. The one that made me swear off late-night holiday specials forever. It happened in 2017, when I was living alone in a small apartment outside Denver. I was 24, working a job I hated, and going through the motions of a holiday season I didn't feel connected to anymore. My parents were on a Caribbean cruise that year. My sister was with her in-laws in Chicago, and I didn't feel like crashing anyone else's family gathering. It was the kind of lonely Christmas that didn't necessarily feel sad, just quiet, uneventful, predictable. Or so I thought. On December 24th, I picked up takeout, put on sweatpants, and settled in for a lazy night. Snow had been falling since the afternoon, soft and steady, the kind that made the world outside look peaceful and distant. I wasn't planning to stay up late, but around 11:30 p.m., I found myself channel surfing mindlessly, looking for something, anything, to fill the silence. Most of the channels were playing reruns of old Christmas movies, sitcom specials, or shopping network sales. Nothing caught my attention until the screen flickered and landed on a channel I didn't recognize. No network name, no logo. It was simply labeled C98, which I had never seen before. The broadcast was already in progress. A man dressed in a Santa suit sat alone in a poorly lit room. Not a cheerful mall Santa. This guy looked tired, older, with sunken eyes and a beard that was more scraggly than fluffy. Behind him was a Christmas tree decorated with mismatched ornaments, sagging tinsel, and yellowed lights that flickered unevenly. Something about the whole setup looked off, like a low-budget public access show. The man stared into the camera and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was wide, strained, like someone forcing themselves to mimic joy. "Good evening," he said. "If you're watching, you're right on time." I raised an eyebrow. Public access weirdness wasn't new, but something about his tone bothered me. I reached for the remote, but before I could press anything, he spoke again. "You don't have to leave yet. You've already come this far." I froze with my thumb hovering over the button. There was no way he was talking to me. It was pre-recorded. Obviously, some strange holiday skit. Still, something inside me felt pinned to the couch. "This is a special Christmas Eve broadcast," he continued. "A tradition for a very small audience, a very selected audience." I felt a chill crawl up my neck. Selected. The camera cut to a close-up. His eyes were blue, pale, almost white. They didn't blink often. They didn't seem to align properly either, like one eye was slightly off-center. "Now," he said softly, "let's begin." The lights in his room flickered. When they steadied again, someone else was sitting beside him. I didn't see them enter. Didn't hear a door. Didn't hear footsteps. It was a little girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a red winter dress and white tights. Her hair was done in neat curls, like a child prepared for a Christmas pageant, but her expression was wrong, completely blank, like a doll's face. The man placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. She didn't react. "This is Emily," he said. "She's been waiting a long time to meet you." My stomach nodded. "Meet me?" Emily slowly turned her head and looked directly into the camera, directly at me. I don't know how else to explain it, except that the eye contact felt real. Not recorded, not generic. Real. Like she was looking through the screen and into my living room. I stood up, gripping the remote so tightly my palm ached, and finally changed the channel. But instead of switching, the TV went black. The screen stayed dark for a full second, just long enough to make me wonder if the power had flickered before the image returned. Same room, same Santa, same girl. The man chuckled softly. "You shouldn't do that," he said. "We're not finished." My pulse hammered in my throat. What the hell was this? I yanked the plug out of the wall. The screen stayed lit. The broadcast continued. The girl stood up slowly. The man didn't move, didn't react, didn't even seem to acknowledge her. He continued to stare at the screen while the girl stepped out of frame. I wanted to run, leave the apartment, call someone, but I couldn't force my legs to move. The camera panned slightly to the left, following the girl as she walked toward a door in the background. She opened it quietly. The inside was pitch black. No walls, no floor, nothing but a void. "Everyone has a place they fear," the man said. "A place they never want to see again. Emily is going to help you remember yours." My heart dropped. My mouth went dry. He couldn't possibly know. He couldn't. But somehow, impossibly, he did. Because when Emily stepped through the door in the broadcast, the camera followed her, and the darkness slowly brightened into an image I recognized instantly. A basement staircase, bare wooden steps, a single hanging bulb. My childhood basement in Ohio. I stumbled backward so fast I hit the coffee table. I hadn't seen that basement in years. My family sold that house ages ago, and yet the screen displayed it clearly. Every dent in the walls, every scuff on the steps. The girl stopped halfway down the stairs and turned toward the camera, toward me. Her face seemed different now, no longer blank, just sad, deeply, painfully sad. "She remembers," the man's voice said, though she was the only one in the frame. "And so do you." I shook my head violently. It wasn't possible. Nobody knew what happened there. I hadn't told anyone. Not my parents, not my sister, not a therapist. I had locked that memory away for 20 years, but the screen didn't care. The camera zoomed in on the far corner of the basement where the shadows pooled thick and unnatural, and from those shadows, something shifted. A silhouette stepped forward, tall, thin, wrong. My throat closed. I don't know how long I stared. 10 seconds? 30? A minute? I only know that the figure began moving toward Emily, slow and deliberate, and every instinct in me screamed to turn off the TV. So I did the only thing I could. I grabbed the entire television and slammed it face down onto the floor. The screen cracked, the sound cut off. Silence. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking so violently I had to sit down to keep from collapsing. I stared at the broken TV for a long time, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Nothing did. Eventually, I convinced myself it was some kind of bizarre hallucination, stress, lack of sleep, maybe even a nightmare I had fallen into without realizing. I dragged the TV to the dumpster outside, tossed it in, and set a mental reminder to buy a new one after the holidays. I showered, sat on the edge of my bed, and tried to calm myself. It was past 2 a.m. when I finally turned off the lights, but as soon as the apartment was dark, the air changed. The temperature dropped, the quiet deepened, and from down the hallway, I saw a faint glow, blue, flickering, the kind of glow a TV makes. I swallowed hard and stepped into the hallway. The living room was lit by a weak flickering light. I rounded the corner slowly, gripping the wall to keep myself upright. There, on the rug where I had smashed it earlier, lay my broken TV. Broken. But the screen was on, and the broadcast was still playing. The man in the Santa suit leaned forward now, filling the entire screen. His pale blue eyes were wide, unblinking, shining unnaturally through the cracks in the glass. "We're almost there," he whispered. "Emily has one more thing to show you." My body locked. My breath vanished. Every muscle went cold. The image cut back to the basement. Emily was now at the bottom of the stairs, facing the camera. Her hand was pointing toward something on the floor, something small and curled. A child hiding behind boxes, a child covering his ears, a child trembling in fear while something tall and faceless loomed over him. It was me. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall so hard that picture frames rattled. My childhood fear flooded me, the memory I had buried, the one I thought time had erased. The night I saw something in that basement, the night I ran upstairs screaming, claiming a man was hiding in the shadows, the night everyone told me I had imagined it, but I hadn't. And now, watching the broadcast, I knew the truth. Whatever I saw that night hadn't been human. Emily lifted her hand again, pointed through the screen, pointed at me, and then she spoke. "You're not finished. The lights in my apartment died. Total darkness swallowed the room, but the TV's broken screen still glowed faintly, casting pale blue light across the carpet. A figure began to form behind Emily, tall, thin, the same shape from my childhood basement. I didn't wait for it to fully appear. I ran out the front door in nothing but socks and a t-shirt. I ran down the icy steps of my building and into the parking lot. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook so badly I missed the lock button twice before managing to unlock it and climb inside. I drove until sunrise. I didn't care where. I just drove. I never returned to that apartment. I never retrieved my belongings. I never bought another television. But the story didn't end there. On January 3rd, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just my name. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the living room of my old apartment. The broken TV sat on the rug, and standing behind it, half hidden in the shadows, was Emily. Her eyes were no longer blank. She looked terrified. Behind her stood the tall silhouette from the basement. Below the image, something was written in neat childlike handwriting. Next year. Don't run. I tore the photo in half, burned it, changed my phone number, moved states. I've never told anyone the full story until now. I don't know what the broadcast was. I don't know who Emily is. I don't know what that thing is that keeps finding me. But I know one thing. Christmas Eve is coming again. And whatever I saw in that basement 20 years ago, whatever followed me through the screen, isn't finished. I never believed in winter being dangerous. I'd always thought it was beautiful. Crisp air, sparkling snow, the quiet that made everything feel suspended in time. That was before last December, before I learned that winter could hide something ancient and patient, something that waited for the isolated, the careless, the alone. I took the caretaker job at an old hunting cabin in the White Mountains of New Hampshire for the winter, thinking it would be a quiet escape from my city life. The owners were an older couple from Boston who came up only during the hunting season, leaving me to handle the place during the off months. The cabin was remote, miles from the nearest town, nestled in a valley with thick woods on all sides. No cell service, no neighbors close enough to see you, and a snow-covered road that would be impassable by the end of November. The first days were peaceful. I settled into a routine. Firewood in the morning, checking the propane and heating systems, cleaning and walking the property. The snow was already thick on the ground when I arrived, and the mountains loomed over the clearing like silent guardians. But even then, there was a feeling in the air I couldn't describe, a tension in the trees, a weight in the sky. It felt like the place was waiting for something. The first sign that something was wrong came on the third night. I woke around midnight, too warm from the fire and sweating under my blankets. I saw it in the moonlight filtering through the frost on the window, a shadow, standing just at the tree line, taller than any human should be, motionless. I froze. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but it was there. I blinked, and when I looked again, it was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it, that my mind was playing tricks because of the isolation. The next morning, I noticed strange tracks in the snow. They were long and wide, almost humanoid, but the proportions were wrong, the heels too narrow, the toes unnaturally long. They led from the woods directly to the cabin's back porch and stopped abruptly. No continuation, no footprints going away, just stopping. I took photos and chalked it up to a prank, though who could have traveled miles of snow silently to do this? The nearest neighbor was over 3 miles away. Over the following days, the cabin began to feel smaller, constricting, suffocating. I would move from room to room, and for a brief moment, it would feel like someone else had been there before me. Objects were slightly out of place. Tools I had left on counters would appear on the floor, chairs slightly turned. I convinced myself I was just being careless, sleep-deprived. By the 5th night, the snowstorm hit. The wind howled against the cabin, shaking the windows and rattling the shutters. I stayed close to the fireplace, trying to keep calm. That night, I woke again, this time to footprints inside the cabin. Slushy, wet prints leading from the kitchen to the hallway, then vanishing halfway to the bedroom. I know I hadn't left the front door unlocked, and no window was open. Panic set in. I spent the rest of the night in the bedroom, huddled against the wall, flashlight in hand. The next morning, I saw the tracks outside had multiplied. More elongated prints forming loops around the cabin, sometimes crossing over themselves. They never led away. They only encircled the building as if something had been pacing, studying me. I tried to leave, tried to drive down the mountain road, but the snow was impassable. The truck wouldn't start. The battery was frozen, cracked. It was as if the mountain itself had trapped me. Days passed. I barely slept. Shadows in the corners of the rooms seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. At night, I could feel the presence just outside the cabin, waiting, pacing, patient. I began talking aloud, telling whoever or whatever it was to leave me alone. That didn't work. I felt it learn, respond, adapt. I could see the change in the snow outside, the tracks shifting in new, strange patterns. One evening, I decided to make my way to the woods. I needed to see whatever it was, to confront it. I wrapped myself in every layer I had and stepped out into the freezing wind. The snow crunched under my boots as I followed the tracks. They led deeper than I expected, into the thick forest. And then I saw them, figures emerging from the darkness between the trees, tall, thin, featureless. No face, no discernible form, only outlines swaying slightly. They didn't move like humans, but they moved with purpose, watching. I stumbled back, terrified, and the figures didn't follow. They just stood, silent, observing. When I turned to run, I realized the path back was gone. The snow behind me was pristine, no footprints, as if I had never left the cabin at all. Fear gnawed at me, a raw, physical thing. I ran blindly through the woods, slipping and falling until I somehow made it back to the cabin. That night, I barricaded every door and window, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. Around midnight, I thought I heard something breathing. I know it sounds absurd, but it was slow, deliberate, like air moving through an enormous chest. I stayed in the corner of the living room, holding a fireplace poker, staring at the windows. Nothing happened. And yet, I couldn't shake the sense that it was moving just beyond the frost, circling the cabin, waiting. By the 12th day, I realized I wasn't alone. I had been ignoring the signs, rationalizing them, but I could no longer deny it. Something was in the snow with me, something ancient, something patient. The tracks outside formed patterns now, deliberate spirals, circles, shapes I couldn't identify, as if trying to communicate something beyond language. Every night, I saw the shadows at the edge of the tree line, always the same, swaying slightly, always watching. Finally, I decided I had to leave. I packed my things and tried the truck again. Miraculously, it started, and I drove down the mountain road, terrified and exhausted. But even as I left, I could feel it in the rearview mirror, the presence of the forest pressing down, watching. When I reached the main road, I stopped for gas and tried to explain to the clerk what had happened. She didn't react, just gave me a blank stare and said, "You're lucky to have gotten out." I never went back. I don't even drive near that mountain range anymore. But sometimes, when I see snow falling, I remember the shapes in the tree line, the tracks circling the cabin, the cold presence that waited for me in the shadows. I know it still waits. It doesn't need me to return. It only needs the cold and the isolation, and it will find someone else. Every winter, I dream of those tracks stretching endlessly into the forest, and I wake up in a cold sweat, certain that the quiet outside my window is more than just the wind. Because I know, in some way I can't understand, that it never sleeps. It waits in the snow, patient, unrelenting, and when it finds someone alone, it doesn't let them go. I tell myself I was lucky. I tell myself it couldn't follow me out of the mountains, but deep down, I know the truth. Some things in the winter do not stay hidden. They do not die. They wait for the cold, the snow, the silence, and the people foolish enough to wander into it. I have never felt safe in winter since. I don't travel north in December. I don't hike in the snow. I don't even look out my window when the wind whistles in the night, because I know if I do, I will see the shapes again, the figures, watching, waiting, patient, and someday, if I am careless, they will find me. I had driven through deserts before, but I had never truly been alone in one until that summer. The job seemed harmless enough. Check a series of old communication towers scattered across a remote section of the Nevada desert, make sure the equipment was intact, record readings, and report back. The company warned me about the heat, the isolation, and the condition of the roads. They didn't warn me about what lived in the desert. I left Las Vegas early in the morning. The highway stretched endlessly behind me, and I knew the first dirt road I'd take would carry me far from anyone else. My truck was packed with supplies, extra water, fuel, food, a GPS device, and a handheld radio. I was confident. The desert is predictable, I told myself. It only punishes the careless. The first day went as expected. Sun blazing, air shimmering with heat waves, miles of empty road. I reached the first tower around noon. The panels were dusty but functional. I noted the readings and drove on. I passed small ridges, dry washes, and rock formations that seemed to stretch on forever. But as the sun fell and shadows lengthened, something felt off. I stopped near a rocky outcrop to set up camp. The air cooled, but the desert felt different at night. I'd spent countless nights camping in the desert before, and I'd always loved the quiet. This night was heavy. The silence pressed against my ears, against my chest. And then I heard it. A faint, deliberate scraping outside my tent. At first, I froze. Perhaps an animal, a coyote or fox, but the sound was methodical, moving around my camp in a circular pattern. My rifle rested nearby, and I gripped it, trying to calm my racing heart. I unzipped the flap slowly. Nothing. Only sand, only rocks, and the faint glow of the stars. When I checked the morning, there were footprints. Slender, elongated, impossibly crooked tracks circling my camp. They led to the ridge and vanished. I felt watched. I felt studied. The next day, I drove on. My GPS blinked erratically. Coordinates led me in impossible loops, back to hills I had just passed. The sun moved strangely, low and bright at times it shouldn't have been. Then, I saw them. Figures, tall and thin, standing on distant dunes, their heads tilted unnaturally. They did not move, yet I could feel them observing. When I tried to approach, they disappeared, only to reappear elsewhere. By the third day, I was exhausted. My water supply was dwindling, and I had no signal to call for help. The desert seemed to twist around me. Hills rose where none had existed. Dunes shifted like waves. I saw shadows moving independently of any light source. At one point, I swore I saw my truck parked on top of a dune I hadn't passed before. When I ran to it, it wasn't there. Only sand. I began to hallucinate, or so I told myself. I saw travelers walking the dunes, calling my name. I ran toward them, only for them to dissolve into heat haze. I saw reflections of myself moving in puddles that shouldn't have existed, and the figures grew bolder. They mirrored my gestures, pacing in perfect rhythm with me, tilting their heads at angles I couldn't match. On the fourth night, I found a ruined shack half buried in sand. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. Inside was a journal, yellowed with age. The entries described someone else's journey through the desert, someone who had disappeared. It spoke of tracks that vanished, shadows that mimicked, a presence that studied and waited. The last page was scrawled in a panic. It does not forget. It learns. I left quickly, realizing that whatever watched me was not human. It was patient. It did not hunt, it observed. It had studied generations of travelers, waiting, learning, practicing. I had become a specimen. By the fifth day, I was near breaking. The sun burned relentlessly. My legs ached. I was dehydrated and paranoid, feeling eyes on me at every dune, every ridge. At a canyon, I hid, exhausted. I watched as the figures emerged at the rim. Some were impossibly tall, some crawled like insects, and one even moved in perfect mimicry of my own gestures. The desert had learned enough to imitate me. I ran blindly, stumbling across dunes and rocks. The desert bent around me, roads twisted into loops, landmarks shifted. Every step I took, the figures adjusted. Time lost meaning. The heat was unrelenting. I could not tell if I was moving forward or simply trapped in an infinite loop. On the sixth night, I collapsed near a dry wash. The figures were everywhere. I could see them pacing, tilting their heads, crawling. They did not chase. They did not attack. They studied, learning every detail of my body, my movements, my fears. I realized then that my survival did not matter. They only needed to know me completely. The seventh day was worse. I wandered endlessly, my mind fraying. The desert itself seemed alive. Dunes rose and fell like breathing waves. Rocks shifted when I wasn't looking. Shadows moved against logic. I had become part of the experiment. Every step, every glance, every breath was observed, cataloged, replicated. By the 8th day, I saw the first attempt at imitation. One of the figures walked along a dune, mimicking my exact gait. Another raised its hand just as I did. I understood the horror. The desert was not trying to kill me. It wanted to replace me. It wanted to learn enough to create something in my image, something that could step into my life if it needed to. On the 9th day, I stumbled across a faint road, cracked and faded. Salvation. I crawled toward it, my body nearly giving out. The figures stayed behind, patient, tilting their heads, watching. I reached a small town on the desert's edge. People stared as I collapsed into the diner, shaking, dehydrated, rambling about impossible tracks, shadows, figures mimicking me. Some thought I was insane. Some thought I had gone mad in the heat. I survived, but I am not the same. The desert has not forgotten me. Sometimes, in a mirror, I see shadows that do not belong to me. Sometimes, on long drives, I catch movement at the edge of the dunes, tall, thin, tilting its head, watching, learning, waiting. I know one day the desert will come for me again. It will not need to hunt. It will already know everything it needs to become me. And then I will understand what it truly means to disappear in the desert. I am alive, but I'm never safe. The desert never forgets. I always loved New Year's Eve. There was something intoxicating about standing on the edge of one year and peering into the next, imagining a clean slate. But last year was different. I'll never forget it. I decided to spend New Year's Eve alone for the first time in years. My friends had other plans, parties, trips, family gatherings. I had the apartment to myself, my small, cluttered one-bedroom in the older part of the city. Cozy, quiet, and perfect for reflection. Or so I thought. The evening started normally. I ordered takeout, poured a glass of sparkling cider, and set up my laptop to stream a live countdown from Times Square. The city outside buzzed faintly through the cracked window, but my apartment was calm, almost too calm. The kind of calm that feels like a lull before a storm. I remember hearing the first odd sound around 10:30. At first, I dismissed it as plumbing, a faint thud, like a heavy object dropping somewhere in the building. Then another and another. The timing was off, irregular, almost deliberate. I froze. My apartment was on the 4th floor, and no one had been there all day. No delivery, no visitors. I rationalized it. Maybe someone upstairs, maybe the wind. By 11, the noises had grown louder, closer. I could hear a slow scratching along the walls, the sound of nails or claws scraping against plaster. My stomach twisted. "Get a grip," I muttered. "It's nothing." I poured another drink and tried to watch TV, but the volume felt muted, distant. The air suddenly became dense, heavy, like I was breathing through water. I rubbed my arms and tried to shake the unease. Then the first knock came. Soft, polite, but somehow wrong. Too deliberate. I stood frozen. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. No answer, just the faint echo of my own voice bouncing back from the hallway. I wanted to ignore it, but instinct told me to check. I approached the door slowly, peering through the peephole. Nothing. Empty hallway. Bare fluorescent lights flickered above, casting a sickly glow. Then the whispering began. Soft at first, almost melodic. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, curling around my skull like smoke. I couldn't make out the words, but it was calling to me, coaxing me to something. I don't know what. By the time the clock struck 11:50, I was pacing, panicked. I'd poured 3 glasses of cider but barely touched any. My phone was dead. I didn't notice until I tried to scroll for distraction. Not that it mattered. No calls, no messages, nothing. Like the world outside had paused, leaving me alone with whatever this was. 11:55. My apartment lights flickered violently. Shadows warped across the walls, elongated and twisted. For a brief second, I thought I saw a figure, tall, thin, standing in the corner behind the couch. I blinked. Gone. I laughed nervously. "I'm losing it," I said aloud. But the whispering continued, louder now, almost urgent. The countdown began on TV. 5 minutes to midnight. I gripped the arms of my chair, heart hammering. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the floor above me. Not tapping, not casual, stomping, heavy, menacing. Midnight drew near. My apartment felt different, wrong. I could feel it, a pulse beneath the floor, a vibration in the walls, and the shadows. They weren't obeying physics anymore. They stretched toward me, reaching as if alive. And then the lights went out. Complete darkness. I stumbled, my hand brushing against the couch, the table. My glass shattered on the floor. The wind outside howled, even though all the windows were closed, and I heard it. A voice, not human, not male, not female. Something old, vast, dripping with malice. "Welcome to your new year." I screamed, but no sound came out. My mouth opened and only silence poured forth. Panic clawed at my throat. Then I saw it. A shadow, impossibly tall, standing at the far corner of the room. It moved, but not like anything living. It stretched and warped with each step, growing taller, darker, more hungry. Its presence pressed against my mind, invading my thoughts, twisting my memories. I could feel my own fear reflected back at me, magnified, crushing. I tried to run. I lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge, locked from the outside. My apartment, the place that had always been safe, had become a trap. The shadow advanced. Its form flickered in the dim light from the fireworks outside. I caught glimpses of eyes, too many eyes, millions of them staring into mine. My chest tightened, every breath a struggle. And then it whispered my name, not my full name, just my first name, like it had been waiting for me, learning me, stalking me through years. I fell to my knees. The floor beneath me felt like liquid, swallowing me inch by inch. I screamed again, finally finding a sound, but it was drowned out by the echo of the city's countdown. 10 seconds to midnight. The fireworks began. I could hear them clearly now, each bang resonating through the walls, shaking the floor. And in those bursts of light, I saw the world around me distort. My apartment stretched impossibly, doors appearing where none should be, windows opening into impossible skies filled with twisting fireworks that smelled like ash and decay. 3, 2, 1, and then nothing. Silence. Darkness. I opened my eyes. I was lying on the floor of my apartment, the morning sunlight streaming in through the window. The city outside was alive again, noisy, normal. I laughed nervously, relief flooding me. "Just a nightmare," I said aloud. "A horrible, stupid nightmare." But something was wrong. I could still hear the whispering, soft, persistent, coming from the corners of the room. The shadows were too dark, too thick. And when I glanced at the calendar, the date had not changed. It was still December 31st. The fireworks outside hadn't happened yet. The phone on the table was still dead. And the knocking began again, slow, deliberate, polite, wrong. I tried to leave, to escape, but the door, it wouldn't open, not from the inside. And then I realized, with a cold, bone-deep certainty, midnight hadn't ended. It wasn't going to. I was trapped in the last moments of the year, over and over, watched by something that thrived on anticipation, fear, and isolation. The countdown was eternal, looping, a never-ending promise of terror. And every time I tried to scream, the shadow learned my voice, twisted it, and sent it back, laughing. It had claimed me for the new year, forever. I've been driving trucks for nearly 20 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Torn up roads, endless storms, near misses with deer and drunk drivers, even the occasional weird hitchhiker. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on that night. That night on Route 213, a road I'd traveled dozens of times became a nightmare I still can't escape. It started like any other late-night run. I was hauling a refrigerated shipment from Michigan to Idaho, a long, lonely stretch of interstate through forests, rivers, and small towns that never seemed to end. The call came in late, voice sharp and tense. Pickups at the old Clayton lot, mile marker 112, midnight sharp, priority shipment, the dispatcher said. There was a pause, a whisper I thought I imagined. Be careful, all right? I shrugged it off. I've been on the road long enough to know that dispatchers sometimes get jittery. Midnight was fine. I liked the quiet, the hum of the engine, the solitude. By the time I arrived, the lot was empty, gray under a half moon that barely peeked through clouds. The warehouse was ancient, its windows broken, steel doors rusted shut. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the trailer. One lone refrigerated unit waited. Cold metal, faint frost forming along the edges. No one was around. No lights except a flickering bulb above the door, swaying in the wind. Inside, a single crate sat. Heavy. Wooden. No markings, nothing to indicate what it contained. Odd, I thought, since the paperwork mentioned a full shipment of similar crates. I leaned closer and noticed scratch marks along the edges, fresh and shallow. I shook my head. Rats, maybe. But then, faintly, I heard something else. A scratching, soft, deliberate, coming from inside the crate. I froze. My hands gripped the crate handle. Nothing made sense. The sound didn't match anything I knew. It was alive. Something inside was moving. Something was trying to get out. Just your imagination, I muttered, though my voice sounded hollow in the empty lot. I hooked the trailer to my truck, climbed in, and started down the highway. The engine hummed, warmth spilling from the vents. The road was empty. Too empty. No other vehicles, no distant lights, just the faint rustle of wind. I glanced at the GPS. It had gone haywire, showing a twisting route that didn't match the road. I ignored it. Fatigue can make anyone paranoid. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time became meaningless. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft and chilling, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Drive. Don't stop. I slammed my hand on the horn. Silence. My eyes darted to the mirrors. Nothing. Just the crate in the trailer, cold metal and wood. The fog rolled in suddenly, thick and viscous, curling around the tires like smoke. Shadows appeared at the edges of the headlights. At first, I thought they were trees. Then, I saw them move. Figures, humanoid but wrong, limbed in ways that no human should be limbed. Faces featureless, pale, moving in rhythm with the truck, keeping pace. My pulse hammered. The crate rattled violently in the back. My stomach lurched. Something inside was alive, clawing, pounding at the walls. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. Drive, or we take you. The whisper grew louder, echoing inside the cab and inside my skull. The road itself seemed to bend, twist, impossible curves forming in the fog. Mile markers disappeared. Signs were blank, replaced with symbols that made my skin crawl. Snow began falling, thick and wet, though the forecast hadn't predicted a storm. Figures darted across the road. I swerved to avoid them, tires screaming on slick asphalt. The crate slammed again, bouncing from side to side. My hands shook uncontrollably. I was trapped, a prisoner of some impossible force I couldn't name. Hours or minutes later, a faint light appeared ahead. A gas station? Impossible. I had been on this stretch for eternity. The shadows seemed to vanish as I approached, slipping away like smoke. Relief washed over me, but it was brief. I pulled into the lot, heart racing, body trembling. The crate was gone. Just an empty trailer. No scratches, no traces, nothing. I stepped out, hoping for some explanation. There was none. The clerk looked at me as though I'd lost my mind. "No deliveries came through here tonight," he said. "Everything looks normal." I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, a combination of fatigue and road monotony. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever was in that crate hadn't left me. It was still out there, watching, waiting. Since that night, I've never driven alone after midnight. Every foggy mile, every empty stretch of highway brings a shiver. The whisper follows me. I hear it in my dreams faintly, urging me to drive. And I know, one day if I ever stop, it will catch me. I keep moving, always moving. Because the last thing that whisper said before vanishing forever was the truth I can't escape. Drive, or we will come for you. Even now when I'm alone, headlights cutting through the fog, I can feel it. Waiting, always behind, always near. And I know that no matter how far I drive, some roads never end. I thought I knew what I was getting into when I booked the cabin for my vacation. Remote, off the grid, a place to escape the chaos of city life. I wanted peace, quiet, and solitude. The website promised it all. A rustic wooden cabin nestled in the woods, overlooking a clear, still lake. The reviews were sparse but glowing. Perfect getaway, they said. Quiet, relaxing. I should have ignored them. I arrived late in the afternoon. The drive had been longer than I anticipated, winding through narrow mountain roads that seemed to twist endlessly, flanked by dense, towering pine forests. The sun was just setting when I finally reached the cabin. From the outside, it was picturesque. Smoke curled from the chimney, the wooden porch looked inviting, and the lake shimmered in the fading light. But as I stepped out of the car, I felt something I couldn't explain, a heaviness in the air, a sense that I was being watched. I brushed it off as exhaustion. The first night was unnerving, but I tried to convince myself it was just the unfamiliar surroundings. The forest seemed to hum softly, a faint whisper of wind. Or maybe it was something else. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of someone whispering my name. I sat up, heart pounding, flashlight in hand, and searched the cabin from top to bottom. Nothing. Just the silence of the woods pressing in. The next morning, I decided to explore the surrounding trails. According to the map I had printed, a short path led to a scenic overlook. The hike started pleasantly enough, sunlight filtering through the branches, birds chirping, the occasional rustle of small animals. But the deeper I went, the darker the forest became. Shadows seemed to move where no light should reach. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, a persistent sense that I was not alone. Every time I turned around, I thought I saw movement, figures slipping between the trees. But whenever I looked directly, there was nothing. After what felt like hours, I reached a small clearing. In the center stood an old, decaying cabin. Its roof was sagging, paint long gone, and the windows were dark, lifeless. Something about it made my stomach turn. Curiosity pushed me closer. On the door were strange symbols carved into the wood, jagged lines, circles, and marks that almost looked like tallying. I stepped back, heart hammering. For a moment I considered leaving, but then I noticed a faint light flickering inside, like a candle. Against my better judgment, I peeked through the broken window. The interior was empty, but the air smelled of decay and smoke. Objects were scattered across the floor, old photographs, broken toys, and journals with brittle pages. I picked up one of the journals, flipping it open. The handwriting was frantic, smeared in places. The entries spoke of whispers calling the writer's name, shadows that moved independently, and a presence that watched constantly. The last entry was smudged with something dark. It waits in the woods. It waits in the water. It knows your name. Don't look. I dropped the journal, stomach churning. When I looked up, the clearing was empty. The forest around me felt suffocating, pressing in closer. Panic surged. I ran blindly along the path I had come, but the forest had shifted. The trail no longer existed. Every tree looked identical, and I had no sense of direction. My flashlight flickered as I stumbled, branches clawing at my face and arms. Eventually, I collapsed near the base of a massive pine, gasping for breath, tears streaming down my face. By nightfall, I somehow found my way back to my cabin. Relief was fleeting. The air inside smelled faintly of damp earth, and the wooden floors had scratches that hadn't been there before, long, deep marks like claws. I barricaded the doors and windows as best I could and tried to sleep. But around 3 a.m., the whispers returned. Not just my name this time, other voices too. Children crying, women screaming, laughter that didn't belong anywhere. The shadows outside the windows shifted unnaturally, stretching and bending as if alive. The following morning, I resolved to leave. I packed quickly and ran to my car, only to find it missing. The gravel driveway was empty, replaced by an endless stretch of forest. I called out, hoping someone would answer, but only the echoes of my own voice returned. And then I saw them, figures emerging from the trees, tall, thin, faceless, moving silently toward me. My legs froze. Panic overwhelmed me as I realized I couldn't escape. I ran into the woods, desperate, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The forest seemed alive, bending and shifting to trap me. I stumbled upon a small black lake, the surface perfectly still, reflecting the twisted trees above. And in the water, I saw my reflection, but not as it should have been. My eyes were hollow, black voids staring back at me, mouth open in a silent scream. The reflection moved independently, mocking me. I tripped backward, falling into the lake. Cold water engulfed me, pulling me under. When I emerged, I was back in the cabin, as if nothing had happened. The fire was burning. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The car, my bag, everything was gone. For a moment, I thought it had been a dream, but the whispering started again. From the corner of the room, my name. I tried leaving again, searching the forest for any sign of a path. Every exit led me back to the cabin. The trees seemed to move when I wasn't looking, closing in, rearranging themselves. Night fell quickly now, unnaturally fast, and the voices grew louder, forming a chorus of torment. Every reflective surface in the cabin, the mirrors, the lake, even the windows, showed something wrong. My face, twisted and hollow, screaming silently, warning me of what I was becoming. I've tried to warn anyone who might stumble upon this place. If you see a cabin on Shadow Lake, stay away. Don't look at the water, don't answer the whispers, and never, ever step inside. Once it knows your name, it follows you forever. I hear it now every night, whispering, calling, waiting. And I know that one day it will reach out to you too. If this story kept you on edge, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for the next one.